On World News tonight, the traffic in human cargo. A woman charged in Texas with running a smuggling ring that left illegal immigrants to die. The latest U.S. raids on Iraqis resisting the occupation. The U.S. gets help from Iraqis informing on their neighbors. And at the heart of the Civil War, the teenage fighters, loyal and enthusiastic and cheap.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin in Texas tonight because in two courtrooms there today, there were cases involving apparent indifference to human life which have got national attention. In one, a judge freed a dozen people whose lives were totally interrupted by a man the judge said was the most devious witness he had seen in 25 years. We'll get to that in a minute. In the other courtroom, a 25-year-old woman was accused of running a smuggling ring that left 19 illegal immigrants to die in a tractor trailer from which they could not escape. That also got a lot of national attention, and we start there with ABC's Pierre Thomas. Pierre?
Peter, the government says it's a big problem, and the woman suspected of running the operation allegedly fled the U.S. after the bodies were found last month.
According to U.S. immigration agents, Carla Patricia Chavez, born in Honduras and a legal resident of the United States, was the ringleader responsible for the deaths of those 19 immigrants last month. Chavez and 17 others were charged today with 58 counts of human smuggling.
She acted as the central coordinating authority of the subordinate cells that actually did the recruiting and crossing the people into the United States, but that she was responsible for sort of making sure that once they got here, they had safe places to stay, that they were fed.
A 5-year-old boy was among the 19 who suffocated in a tractor trailer in sweltering heat in Victoria, Texas, 100 miles south of Houston. Today, the government released these photos of inside the trailer.
We couldn't identify two of the bodies at all.
The ring allegedly smuggled people from all over Latin America at a cost of $1,800 per head. The immigrants were taken to a series of safe houses in Brownsville and Harlingen, Texas. They were then driven to cities all over the country. The Attorney General told ABC News today the Texas case is reflective of a multi-billion-dollar black market industry.
The problem is characteristic of smuggling of individuals in the United States from all around the globe. They're motivated by sheer greed and money.
Peter, the government says that tens of thousands of illegal aliens are smuggled across the border each year.
Thanks very much, Pierre Thomas. On the first case, and while Pierre's been talking, we've had a technical breakdown with Texas for the second story, but we promise it to you within minutes. But while we're waiting, let's go to Iraq, because in Iraq today, U.S. officials said today that 10 Americans were wounded when 2 U.S. convoys were ambushed. It happened in the midst of the latest American opposition to flush out people who have been harassing and killing American forces. Here's ABC's Dave Marish.
In nighttime operations, hundreds of U.S. forces are raiding towns and villages west of Baghdad. Armor rolling through the streets, sudden loud knocks on the door. People suspected of plotting attacks on American soldiers put under arrest. A normal raid, but now with a crucial difference. An Iraqi man in a helicopter directing the raiders. The American troops who broke through Hamid Mahmoud's front door weren't sweeping house to house, hauling away dozens of suspects through an entire neighborhood. In Chaldea, they knew just where to go. Hit just 6 homes out of 60, and they knew who they were after. For example, 2 of this man's brothers, fingered as part of the anti-American resistance.
They put bags over their heads and took them away.
And when troops trashed a house, they almost always got what they were looking for. 6 houses hit, 9 arrests, and contraband. These crates contained highly explosive cordite. A box in a nearby house held the plastic explosive C4 and detonator cord. The selective targeting, the efficient arrests, almost everyone in Chaldea knew what that meant.
There was someone who knows the area in that helicopter.
That's what's new about Operation Desert Scorpion, Iraqi snitches. U.S. military intelligence admits they had one in Chaldea this morning, and in Baghdad, and in Ramadi, where American raiders also hit today. Dave Marish, ABC News, Baghdad.
Now next door to Iran, where the demonstration against the country's religious leaders appear to be gaining momentum almost day by day. We don't know what difference it makes, but the Bush administration is getting some credit for publicly encouraging them. ABC's Jim Shooter reports on Iran Tonight.
For 6 straight nights, the protesters have lined the streets around Tehran University. When students are blocked from entering the campus, other residents have stopped traffic and honked their horns in a show of support. They chant death to Iran's ruling religious clerics, an extremely dangerous thing to do in Iran, and they demand democratic reforms. We need to change our policies, said this man. I hope there will be an opening up to the outside world. So far, the government's responded harshly. Eyewitnesses say demonstrators have been attacked by riot police and by Islamist vigilantes riding motorcycles. When ABC News tried to transmit pictures from the crackdown today, they were censored.
I saw a lot of people being beaten up by both riot police and these vigilante groups. They were just random people. Maybe they'd shouted a slogan out of the car window. Maybe they'd honked their horn a bit too loudly.
What video there is of the protest is being beamed back to Iranians by an Iranian-American satellite network based in Los Angeles. And tonight, viewers calling into that network from Iran say the protests are spreading to other cities. Jim Shudo, ABC News.
Well, Iran is wrestling with the future and the politics of its nuclear program, among other things. Today, the UN's Nuclear Monitoring Agency and the United States were pushing Iran to sign an agreement that would allow more thorough inspections. Iran says it will consider signing in exchange for nuclear technology. So what does the U.S. intend to do, the Bush administration specifically, about Iran's apparent defiance of the nuclear inspectors? ABC's Terry Moran is at the White House tonight. Terry, the Iranians very much at the forefront today. The Bush administration says they're crushing dissent. They're on the U.S.'s terrorist list. And now they think there's a potential nuclear threat. What will the administration do?
Keep up the pressure, Peter, both rhetorically and diplomatically. Right now, White House officials sense that the Iranian regime is feeling the heat, and they want to turn that heat up.
And what's the definition of pressure now?
It's a good question. One thing it's not right now is military. There are no plans, they say, for any kind of airstrikes against those nuclear facilities. But it's primarily diplomatic and rhetorical. The administration feels that there's a united international front right now with Russia and the European Union and the UN pressuring Iran on the nuclear issue. And as far as the protests are concerned, the president will continue to speak out because they think just shining a light on the oppression there will help the demonstrators.
Many thanks, Terry. Terry Moran at the White House. Now to several items in the overseas briefing today. The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said today that Israeli forces would continue to attack members of the militant group Hamas. And in Gaza, Egyptian government officials were trying to convince Hamas and other groups to call a ceasefire. Hamas said it was considering it, and not much more than that. In China today, a milestone for the world's largest engineering project. The first 2 ships passed through the locks on the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, including a passenger ferry. The dam won't be completed for another 6 years. It was built to stop severe flooding and to generate power, but more than 1 million people will be forced to move to make way for the project when their lands are flooded. So now back to Texas, where a judge today released 12 people who had spent years in jail for crimes they almost certainly didn't commit. They were among dozens of suspects, mostly black, arrested after a lone law enforcement officer said he caught them selling drugs. He gave very little evidence, in fact, in some cases, no evidence to back up his charges. In the town of Tulia, that was enough until now. In Tulia tonight, here's ABC's Mike Von Fremd.
They arrived at the courthouse this morning in shackles.
Well, ready to be released?
Yes, ma'am. Their families were crowded outside and inside. It took the judge less than half an hour to set all 12 free on bail.
And this court is adjourned. Thank you.
Joe Moore, a hog farmer, had been sentenced to 99 years. Dennis Mitchell was serving 18 years.
How many years have you been in prison?
4 long ones.
What's it like to see your family today?
A great day. A great day.
July 23, 1999 was their darkest day. At dawn, 43 blacks, 10% of the town's African-American population, was rounded up and accused of selling massive amounts of cocaine. They were charged and convicted solely on the testimony of one undercover agent who offered no supporting evidence.
His word only. No tape recording, No wire transmission, no photographs, no surveillance, absolutely zero, zip, nada.
The undercover agent Tom Coleman has now been discredited and charged with perjury. The judges called Coleman the most devious, non-responsive witness this court has seen in 25 years. The 12 released today lost valuable time. 4 years ago, Freddie Brookins Jr. was just about to begin college. His grandmother was one of the few who never lost faith. What's it like for you today to be able to have him have his arm around you?
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
12 men and women who now must all begin life again. Mike Von Fremd, ABC News, Tulia.
When we come back this evening, we'll take a closer look at Children in Arms, the army of underage fighters in Africa. Flooded out, the water takes over in West Virginia. And at the end of the broadcast tonight, the new passion for fencing. Americans gain ground and look to the Olympics.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Chevy Trucks.
Other news around the country today, police in Phoenix say the Roman Catholic bishop there will be charged with leaving the scene of a hit-and-run accident in which a male pedestrian was killed. Bishop Thomas O'Brien was arrested late this afternoon. Police traced a license plate number to the bishop's car and found the windshield caved in, as you can see. The Supreme Court had handed down a ruling involving crime and the mentally ill. The decision makes it more difficult, but not impossible, for the government to forcibly medicate some mentally ill defendants to make them well enough to stand trial. The ruling does not apply to people accused of violent crimes. In West Virginia today, severe and sudden flooding has driven people to higher ground for the second time in less than a week. In Charleston, the water swept away a FedEx truck, as you can see, while the employees who'd scrambled onto a nearby bank just simply stood and watched. The water was moving much too fast for even any rescue boat. There have been, on the other hand, no injuries reported. The actor Hume Cronyn has died today. His acting career began on the stage more than 70 years ago. He was perhaps best known to a wide public for the Cocoon movies of the 1980s with his wife Jessica Tandy. She died in 1994. Cronyn was legendary for his versatility, playing a wide range of characters from Shakespeare to gangsters to grouchy old men. He won 4 Tonys on Broadway as well as 3 Emmys in television. His sole Oscar nomination, 1944. He was born in Canada, and he gave up the law for acting, and he died yesterday at his home in Connecticut to prostate cancer, and he was 91. In Los Angeles, hundreds of people attended a public memorial today for Gregory Peck, who died last week at 87. Delivering the eulogy was Peck's old friend and co-star Brock Peters, who played the black man that Peck defended in his most famous role, the lawyer Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. When we come back this evening, we'll take a closer look at children on the front lines. Thousands of boy soldiers going to war. We're going to take a closer look tonight at the child soldiers. The United Nations says that nearly 300,000 children under the age of 18 are fighting in 30 conflicts in various parts of the world. About a third of these young fighters are in Africa, and many of them in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 4 years of civil war have now claimed more than 3 million lives. The French-led peacekeeping force, which recently arrived in the country, is now coming face-to-face with the children. ABC's David Wright reports tonight from Bunia.
For a group of young boys, today began with a drill. These are the soldiers of Congo's civil war, teenage warriors in hand-me-down fatigues. Most of them have been soldiers for years.
How old is that boy?
He's 18, he says, but he can't even say it with a straight face. They order the young boy to go inside, out of sight.
Using soldiers under the age of 15 is a war crime, but local commanders don't seem to care. The UN estimates that between 40 to 60% of the soldiers fighting in Congo's civil war are children.
There are believed to be tens of thousands of them. They're loyal, enthusiastic, and cheap.
The majority of the people with guns are children. Anything from 8 to 16, 18, but the average age is 12.
12-year-old Kisanbo is already an ex-soldier. He quit the army because, he says, the food was bad. They fed us only a handful of beans and corn each morning, he says. The commanders have been warned repeatedly. Thomas Lubanga, the Hema warlord who controls Bunia, claims to lead an army of 15,000. I have no child soldiers, he says. He is lying.
You just have to look around the streets. He's got more than 50% of the soldiers who are kids. It's not impossible for him to deny that.
French peacekeepers have been authorized to shoot any troublemakers. It bothers them that they now face an army of children.
It's a pity to see young children with a weapon, but the mandate is clear. Every people who threaten the force will be engaged.
In other words, if keeping the peace here means they have to kill children, so be it. David Wright, ABC News, Bunia, Congo.
For more on this conflict in the Congo and the children, you can log on to abcnews.com, where they have more. When we come back this evening, the final report in our broadcast. These are young Americans in peaceful pursuit. They want to go to the Olympics, and thousands of them are fencing. Just a brief review of the main stories this evening. A 25-year-old woman and 17 others were charged with human smuggling after an illegal ring left 19 people dead in Texas. They could not, you'll recall, escape the tractor-trailer that they were riding in. And a judge in Tulia, Texas, freed a dozen people today who were arrested for dealing drugs by a law enforcement officer who has since been totally discredited. And finally this evening, fencing. This is a classic sport which has been gaining in popularity, particularly in the United States, and thus changing the face in some degrees, as you will see, of international competition. We first came upon a lot of these smugglers out in Colorado Springs some months ago, and this week when the World Cup tournament came to New York City, we decided to follow up on some of the young American rising stars. It is about style and finesse and speed. Fencers sometimes claim that the tip of a fencing sword, in this case a foil, is the second fastest moving object in sport. Only a bullet is faster.
I'm just right here on the part of getting hit right now. Really?
Competitive fencing is growing rapidly in America.
We've doubled in size in the past 5 years. It's not just the big cities, it's also the small towns.
There are 17,000 Americans who fence competitively in a sport that has long been dominated by Europeans. But the Americans are coming. For 3 magic weeks this season, 24-year-old Keith Smart of Brooklyn was ranked #1 in the world. It's taken a lot of work. Oh, and some ribbing from his friends.
A lot of jokes and things of that nature, like Zorro or On Guard. But like once they see that I'm traveling, going to like California one weekend, then Spain the next weekend, then they started to have a lot of respect for fencing.
Fencing as a sport has some important roots in the 16th century. There was fencing in the American colonies. There has been fencing at every Olympics since the modern games were established in 1896. And today it is attracting more and more African Americans.
Somehow you got to survive the first round.
Peter Westbrook won a bronze medal for fencing in 1984. He teaches fencing in the inner cities. 3 of his pupils made the last Olympics.
Keith was one of them. In this next Olympic game, we'll have 4 or 5 kids.
This weekend, the World Cup series of fencing was in New York City. This time, the Italians won the gold.
Even if you're #1 ranked, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to win the next bout.
But as of this weekend, another American reached the top. Seda Jacobson of Georgia did so well over the weekend. She is now the first American to be ranked #1 in the world in women's saber. As we said, it is about style and finesse and speed. That is our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Hope you have a good evening, and then we'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.